Chapter 11. Now, we left off in chapter 10 where the Israelites, they're leaving Sinai. Everything's been established, the law, the next objective, enter the promised land and take it. And when the people complained, it displeased the Lord. And the Lord heard it, and his anger was kindled, and the fire of the Lord burnt among them and consumed them that were in the uttermost parts of the camp. Now this brings up the immediate question, what were they complaining about? They began to mutter some complaints, according to Benson. They began to mutter some complaints, and for a while, it seems, kept their discontent from coming to Moses' ear. The chief cause of their murmuring is represented to be their growing weary of the manna, upon which they had now lived for a year upon. But this complaining, it displeased the Lord so much that he sends a fire down upon them. And the people cried unto Moses, and when Moses prayed unto the Lord, the fire was quenched. And he called the name of the place Taberah, meaning burning, because the fire of the Lord burnt among them. And the mixed multitude that was among them fell a-lusting, and the children of Israel also wept again, and said, Who shall give us flesh to eat? Now notice the distinction between the mixed multitude and that of the children of Israel. These mixed multitude would have been Egyptians and people from other nations as well, most likely. And pretty much all of them would have converted to belief in the true God. But we hear about how they fell a-lusting. The words can denote any bodily appetite or desire, legitimate or otherwise. In 1 Corinthians 10:6, Christians are warned by the example of the Israelites. Now these things were our examples, Paul wrote, to the intent we should not lust after evil things as they also lusted. Verse 5, we remember the fish which we did eat in Egypt freely, the cucumbers and the melons and the leeks and the onions and the garlic. But now our soul is dried away. There is nothing at all beside this manna before our eyes. And the manna was a coriander seed, and the color thereof is the color of bdellium. And this is so like, people, you have this manna which is representative of Christ being the true bread of heaven. And that's not enough for them. This is just like the 5,000 in whom were fed, yet whenever Christ began to preach unto them, they left. And the people went about and gathered it and ground it in mills, or beat it in a mortar, and baked it in pans, and made cakes of it. And the taste of it was as the taste of fresh oil. And when the dew fell upon the camp in the night, the manna fell upon it. Then Moses heard the people weep throughout their families, every man in the door of his tent, and the anger of the Lord was kindled greatly. Moses also was displeased. Notice how it says every man in the door of his tent. This was talking about publicly. And it's believed that this was a planned display in order to further move God or Moses in order to let them go back to Egypt. And it really comes across as very childlike behavior. And Moses said unto the Lord, Wherefore hast thou afflicted thy servant, and wherefore have I not found favor in thy sight, that thou layest the burden of all this people upon me? Their conduct shows how deeply they had been debased and demoralized by long oppression, while his reveals a state of mind agonized and almost overwhelmed by a sense of the undivided responsibilities of his office. Have I conceived all this people? Have I begotten them, that thou shouldest say unto me, Carry them in thy bosom, as a nursing father beareth the sucking child, unto the land which thou swarest unto their fathers? Whence should I have flesh to give unto all this people? For they weep unto me, saying, Give us flesh, that we may eat. I am not able to bear all this people alone, because it is too heavy for me. And this is actually very unreasonable on Moses' behalf. The responsibility of this people was never placed upon the shoulders of Moses. Moses was to simply tell them what God says, and God takes care of them. Moses, he couldn't sustain these people for one day, and God has already done it for over a year. And if thou deal thus with me, kill me, I pray thee, out of hand, if I have found favor in thy sight, and let me not see my wretchedness. The stress is so unbearable that Moses is begging to die. He even says, Let me not see my wretchedness, or live to be the unhappy man I shall be, pressed with such a weight of government, affected and afflicted with the wants of a people I cannot relieve. And the Lord said unto Moses, Gather unto me 70 men of the elders of Israel, whom thou knowest to be the elders of the people, and officers over them, and bring them unto the tabernacle of the congregation, that they may stand there with thee. Notice before we go any further, this of the 70 elders, they the Sanhedrin at the time of Christ, they traced back because there were 70 members, part of the Pharisees, Sadducees, part of the Sanhedrin. At that time, they would trace that number back. And the reason why they had 70 was because of instances like this. And I will come down and talk with thee there, and I will take of the Spirit which is upon thee, and will put it upon them. And they shall bear the burden of the people with thee, that thou bear it not thyself alone. And say thou unto the people, sanctify yourselves against tomorrow, and ye shall eat flesh. For ye have wept in the ears of the Lord, saying, who shall give us flesh to eat? For it was well with us in Egypt. Therefore the Lord will give you flesh, and ye shall eat. Ye shall not eat 1 day, nor 2 days, nor 5 days, neither 10 days, nor 20 days, but even a whole month, until it come out at your nostrils. I watched a movie about Moses one time, and they were playing this particular scene as a happy thing. Moses says, you will have meat, and you'll have so much of it that it'll be spewing out of your nostrils. And the people were rejoicing at this, which I'm certain that these probably did too. But it was not a happy moment. This is something that the Lord is putting on them for a burden, because it goes on, and it be loathsome unto you. It'll be coming out of your nostrils and be loathsome unto you, because that ye have despised the Lord which is among you, and have wept before him, saying, why came we forth out of Egypt? Now do not pass up the very significant nuance within these words, because that ye have despised the Lord which is among you. Not just despised the Lord, but the Lord which is among you. Meaning that the very presence of God, is among you. It is displayed night and day through the pillar and the fire, and this is a direct offense to his presence. And Moses says something very unfaithful right here. The people among whom I am are 600,000 footmen, meaning soldiers. Many more, 2 million, 2.5 million people altogether. And thou hast said, I will give them flesh, that they may eat a whole month. Shall the flocks and the herds be slain for them to suffice them? Or shall all the fish of the sea be gathered together for them to suffice them? And this is actually a pretty accurate depiction from what I would imagine, how it's like a sea of people. And the Lord said unto Moses, is the Lord's hand waxed short? Thou shalt see now whether my word shall come to pass unto thee or not. And Moses went out and told the people the words of the Lord, and gathered the 70 men of the elders of the people, and set them round about the tabernacle. And one can see in this instance how even the most faithful among us can still fall into a certain amount of disbelief. And the disciples did this over and over again. And the way that Jesus responded was, O ye of little faith. How often do we read that in the New Testament? O ye of little faith. And the Lord came down in a cloud, and spake unto him, and took of the Spirit that was upon him, and gave it unto the 70 elders. And it came to pass that, when the Spirit rested upon them, they prophesied, and did not cease. Now there's different levels of prophesying. It could be preaching, testifying of the Lord. This would have been completely out of character for them, much like on the day of Pentecost. And this would have been an outward showing of something that happened inwardly to them. The Spirit of the Lord was upon them, so that it would add legitimacy to their new office. But there remained 2 of the men in the camp. The name of the one was Eldad, and the name of the other Medad. And the Spirit rested upon them, and they were of them that were written. They were part of this 70. But went not out unto the tabernacle, and they prophesied in the camp. So these 2 went out, and began to prophesy among the people. And there ran a young man, and told Moses, and said, Eldad and Medad do prophesy in the camp. And Joshua the son of Nun, the servant of Moses, one of his young men, answered and said, My lord Moses, forbid them. And Moses said unto Joshua, Enviest thou for my sake? Would God that all the Lord's people were prophets, and that the Lord would put his Spirit upon all of them. He says, I wish that this would happen to everyone. And Moses gat him into the camp, he and the elders of Israel. Now, what just happened is a pretty significant moment. The conceptions of the divine Spirit and his activity have differed in different ages, but Moses expresses the conviction, which is true for all time, that the possession of the Spirit is not confined to particular persons or classes, with a deeper realization at this moment of the truth. Jeremiah and Joel teach that the gift of the Spirit is universal. Joel's words in the Old Testament were claimed by Simon Peter to have been fulfilled in Acts 2:16 in the New Testament, and The Apostle Paul rejoices in the unity of the body of Christ because it is animated by one Spirit, dividing to each one severally, even as he will. There went forth a wind from the Lord, and brought quails from the sea, and let them fall by the camp, as it were a day's journey on this side, and as it were a day's journey on the other side, round about the camp, and as it were 2 cubits high upon the face of the earth. This is the second time that God gave them these quails. He sent them the former year in much about the same season in Exodus 16, but neither in the same quantity nor with the same design as now. And the people stood up all that day and all that night and all the next day, and they gathered the quails. He that gathered least gathered 10 homers, and they spread them all abroad for themselves round about the camp. And while the flesh was yet between their teeth, before it was chewed, the wrath of the Lord was kindled against the people, and the Lord smote the people with a very great plague. Now, this reading can throw a lot of people off, but notice how it says, while the flesh was yet between their teeth and before it was chewed, meaning before the supply ran out. This would have been about a month later. And we're told about how the Lord strikes them with a great plague. Not all of them. The noun makkah, plague, is cognate to the verb which is rendered smote. It is frequently used of a stroke inflicted by God, as, for example, pestilence or any epidemic sickness. A surfeit, which is overindulgence of food in this case, such as that in which the Israelites had indulged, especially under the circumstances in which they were placed, would naturally produce a considerable amount of sickness. And he called the name of that place Kibroth Hattaavah, because there they buried the people that lusted, and the people journeyed from Kibroth Hattaavah unto Hazeroth, and abode at Hazeroth. I do like Matthew Henry's comment at this point. They paid dearly for their feast. God often grants the desires of sinners in wrath, while he denies the desires of his own people in love, because these lusts will kill you, lead you to destruction. What we unduly desire, if we obtain it, like sex, drugs, rock and roll, all of these things, we have reason to fear will be some way or other a grief and cross to us. What multitudes there are in all places who shorten their lives by excess of one kind or other. Let us seek for those pleasures which satisfy, but never surfeit, and which will endure forevermore.